I was jokingly calling my pal my side piece while we were traveling together when he did this. I never imagined using Reddit to genuinely ask for relationship advice. Even after speaking with my family, friends, and therapists, I still feel that I need other viewpoints. What's better than thousands of strangers' opinions? It's awful. As you can see, to protect my anonymity and ensure that everyone understands my narrative, I will use fictitious identities. I'm Alice, a 25-year-old woman who has been in a relationship for 2 years. Luke, my boyfriend, is 25 as well. I'm completely smitten with him. Before we started dating, I never imagined I would find the right boyfriend. He is really lovely, loves me, treats me like a goddess, and remembers even the slightest details of our relationship to give me things that are relevant to it. My family loves him more than they love me at times. In summary, he is incredible. I will always love him. We really didn't get off to a smooth or ideal start. Our relationship started out completely messed up. My ex-boyfriend and Luke were once best friends. Yes, lame, I know. Even worse, we are together because I cheated on my ex with Luke. I'll go over the convoluted details of my previous relationship before you pass judgment. I began dating my ex-boyfriend, Eric, when I was 20 years old. He was my age, too. At college, I got to know him and Luke, despite having different degrees. We all attended the same university, so we would frequently cross paths. They became buddies with my friends after we attended the same gatherings, after kissing at a party. At school, Eric asked me out on a date after we grew closer and closer. I devoted a portion of my life to Eric over the following 3 years. I never considered myself to be the type of person who prioritizes her lover over all other things. I struggled a lot to suppress that emotion at the moment. I reminded myself that since my academic and professional objectives are my top priorities, I must accomplish them whether or not Eric is around. Our relationship required a lot of upkeep, which was the issue. He would feel abandoned and harmed if I neglected him or separated myself to study for my exams. Several times, I found myself wondering how he was feeling, not just the usual boyfriend thoughts. It was unpleasant and distracting how much he was on my mind. Being with him was overpowering, even though I loved him. My relationship with Eric wasn't very good, and it's a difficult subject between Luke and me, so I don't want to think about it or discuss it much. Both Eric and I experienced mental health problems. We supported and understood one another, but with time, we unknowingly became so engrossed in them that we simply lived in a depressing rabbit hole. Together, Eric started drinking excessively to block out his troubles. When the stress of school became unbearable, in the 3rd year of our partnership, things became worse. Luke became more involved in. At that point, they resided with 2 other lads. In their college dorm that year, Luke moved off campus to live with his girlfriend, but she felt the rent for the remainder of the year. Since no student was assigned to his room, he continued to live there but was constantly in the vicinity of his former dorm. I frequently sought his assistance, usually when Eric was locked in the bathroom and puking up after drinking. Without a doubt, he handled it better than I did. I felt less anxious about the circumstance after realizing how much he cared for Eric. Even if these instances weren't typical, I always felt a little less love for Eric when they occurred, since he wouldn't recall them the following day. I had to listen to him utter the worst things about me and act as though they had never happened. My boyfriend and I were going to the movies together, so I was meant to meet them at their hostel one evening. Eric promised to get home by 6:30, the end of his class, so we could see the 7 p.m. movie screening. Luke was alone in the living room watching TV when I arrived at 6 o'clock. While I waited for Eric, we spoke and watched his favorite TV program. He hadn't arrived after an hour and a half of waiting. Luke occasionally had a sympathetic expression on his face as he looked at me. He felt sorry for me. It was easy to determine. I asked Luke, "Do you think he is okay? Should I go after him?" Around 8 o'clock, Luke claimed he most likely forgot to notify me since he was preoccupied with his teacher. As soon as I stood up, I realized he was merely attempting to cheer me up. I was worried that my boyfriend might have been robbed or something when I called him for the 15th time, but Luke reminded me that we were on campus. Nothing dangerous would happen to him, no matter how hard he tried. I was simply there to shout at him. I kept replaying the fight in my mind. When that jerk finally arrived, I prepared all of my remarks in my mind. He opened the front door after 9 o'clock. Although I doubt I recall many specifics, I suppose it is simple to recall the causes of my rage. I was so annoyed that I had to wait 3 hours without receiving a single text. When I saw Eric enter, I was still eating the ice cream Luke had given me out of sympathy. He staggered in with his eyes barely open and his voice slurred, and I got up, ready to scream at him, leaving the bowl on the center table. I wanted to grab the bowl of ice cream and slam it into his head. I said, "You are drunk." In the most irate tone I could manage, he began to excuse himself. I swore and screamed at him. He made an effort to apologize, but when I enraged him, he simply retaliated with incomprehensible yet irate comments. Luke just sat on the couch and stared at us, stunned and utterly mute. He didn't want to get engaged, but he also lacked the courage to pull away from it. I was screaming at Eric so frantically that he began to. When I grabbed his arm to attract his attention again, he screamed, "You are such a," and then hit me in the nose. He was looking toward his bedroom and pretended to ignore me. My blood pressure dropped instantly, my vision went black, and I heard Luke yelling incomprehensible words. I could hardly hear the muted sound of their words, and it felt like my head was underwater, nasal bleeding. I looked up to see Luke preventing Eric from reaching me by grabbing his arms and body. Luke glanced at me to see how I was doing. I turned to face him again, and he instructed me to wait outside on the stairs. I heard Eric screaming and calling my name as I hurried out of the apartment without even questioning him. I couldn't stop crying as I sat on the dorm stairs, feeling them strangely mix with my nosebleed. I still think that this is the biggest heartbreak I have ever experienced. After 3 years together, I was certain that one portion of my affections for Eric had just died at that same moment. But I started to doubt it when he raised his hand at me as if it were nothing. In an attempt to conceal the tiny tears on his cheeks, Luke returned. I locked Eric in his room and asked our roommate to come check on him after he made sure I was okay. I wasn't, but I was alive and conscious, and then he said, "Let's get out of here and take care of your nose." I was shown to Luke's apartment. Being off campus made me feel more at ease. I truly didn't want to be wherever he could find me. After we arrived at Luke's flat, he prepared me a cup of tea, washed and cared for my nose, and gave me a clean shirt free of blood stains. He was reluctant to discuss what had just transpired with me. He kept saying, "It's okay now." I remained silent as I tried to take it all in and tried, but failed. To avoid reliving the previous half hour, I was told to sleep in Luke's bed. I didn't object when he offered to sleep on the couch. As he showed me where the additional blankets were, I began to cry sporadically. Luke simply sat by my side and gave me a hug without saying anything. He didn't seem to mind that I sobbed on his shoulder for a very long time. I agreed when he suggested that I watch a movie to divert my attention. Without a doubt, the chaos in my head would have prevented me from falling asleep. The following morning, I awoke on the couch with my head resting on Luke's shoulder and his arm wrapped around me. We unintentionally fell asleep while watching TV, but I didn't mind because I felt secure and at ease with his closeness. Since Luke viewed me more as a broken object that needed to be cared for than as a female he could truly have, I suppose he wasn't feeling strange about the circumstance. It was. I needed a buddy so badly at the time that I stayed at his place for the weekend, despite Eric's persistent pleas for me to let him in so we could chat. Being away from Eric was what I most wanted, and Luke at least stated I could stay as long as I wanted. The Sunday in question we ordered pizza at Luke's last night and discussed the thousands of calls, texts, and other things Eric did to try to make amends with me. Luke agreed that it was best not to speak to him, and I did not want to. We talked all night long. We hugged a lot during those few days since I was so accustomed to his physical contact that it felt natural. Luke said he didn't think Eric deserved me and that he could never treat a lady the way Eric treated me when we were tidying up the kitchen. He gave me a serious look when he said that, so I gave in to the invasive need to kiss Luke. And when he kissed me back, I got butterflies. That day, we shared a bed. But we also didn't discuss it at all. It was a complex scenario, although we both wanted to do it. Neither of us wanted to talk about how much we were influencing a loved one who suffered from severe alcoholism. In relation to Eric, his buddies contacted his parents, who made the decision to have him checked into a treatment facility. I received a call from on Monday. She stated what he had done to me. Instead of creating a crisis when we broke up, she wanted me to be there to help him during the early stages of his rehabilitation. I reluctantly got into a car with my boyfriend and his family since I didn't want to make things worse. The 2-hour drive would have been even more unpleasant if Luke had asked if I wanted him to be there. Since our school was located in a tiny city, his parents couldn't find many clinics in the area that met their needs. All the way through the ride, Eric tried to talk to me, but I kept saying, "I am not talking about this in front of your parents." I was clearly ending our relationship. I simply needed to wait until his life was solid. I simply went to visit days to catch up and play cards with him throughout that time. Luke and I continued to see each other. Since Eric was in treatment, I couldn't end our relationship for fear that he might flee the clinic and knock on my door intoxicated. In addition, I was angry with him for his treatment of me. I made an effort to see the wider picture, but I kept telling myself that violence in a relationship is never appropriate, and that I would never forgive Eric for his actions. It wasn't that I felt bad about it. Luke did, however, he allowed himself to become involved as our affections for one another deepened. My feelings for Eric had faded a few months prior when he began making the worst choices of his life. Thus, I was beginning to feel strongly for Luke. It was light, romantic, effortless, and natural. I lost a lot of time trying to make Eric feel better, and even my grades improved when he was gone from my life. I could now study and date someone who was from it. A month and a half after Eric entered rehab, I ended our relationship. He was getting much better, yet he was still there. That our breakup was unavoidable, and I informed him that I was. It was a little worse with Luke, but I couldn't tell him a lie. His response was ultimately better than I had anticipated, and my narrative with Eric came to a close at that point. Looking back 2 years later, I have no regrets about anything I did. The best thing that has ever occurred to me is Luke. Although our relationship is wonderful, we are currently going through a challenging time with some friends. Luke seems to be thinking about something that has to do with our history. We've had several arguments, and I'm rather concerned. A birthday excursion to a San Diego beach was organized by one of our closest friends. We talked about relationships, experiences, heartbreak, infidelity, and other topics during one of our late-night group discussions while we were there for the weekend. We were accustomed to doing every time. We had no trouble discussing our previous dating experiences, even though everyone there was in a relationship. One of the females admitted to having an affair with her older brother's buddy while she was in high school. Her story made us giggle since she fell in love with the man she cheated on and was discarded by both of them. He didn't react well when I quipped that Luke was my side piece that had worked out. He looked at me irritably as everyone else was laughing. When we arrived at our room, we began to argue, trying to keep it quiet so that no one could hear, but no one noticed, and he remained silent. He claimed that he felt uneasy discussing what had transpired with Eric in a chat when it occurred. Every one of our pals was present. They knew Eric. They attended the same college as us. None of them are close to Eric, and they all agreed with our decision to have Luke and me together. We were already extremely close, since it isn't a huge thing in our lives anymore. It didn't seem like a problem to discuss it with kids. Nonetheless, Luke seems a little agitated when someone brings up Eric. He didn't seem to mind when I made jokes like that. Luke claimed that anytime someone brings up Eric, he can't handle the weight on his conscience. In his life, he resembled a ghost. He believed that while he was mired in morals, I had forgotten and moved on. The term side piece that I used to describe him also infuriated him. He doesn't want our relationship to start out looking like an affair, which it sort of was. That's presumably why he finds it so upsetting. He probably didn't say anything because he wants me to feel comfortable talking about prior traumas, especially because we were both there in this one. I suppose he felt that way the other times I brought up Eric. In any case, he finds it a difficult topic. I was aware of that, but I didn't believe it was a major source of anxiety for him. I claimed I had no reason to talk about it anymore, and I apologized. He claimed that was all well. But when we returned home from the excursion the following day, he was still acting a little strange. After a few friends arrived in our car, they fell asleep in the back seat within an hour, leaving Luke and me in an awkward silence while listening to a song that was so low volume that we could hardly hear it. I felt like he was staring at me, so I continued to stare ahead and observe the road. I heard Eric say, I think I want to sit down and talk to Eric. I let out an inside cry, wondering why the topic wasn't finished yet. I inquired as to the source of this emotion and its cause, since he hadn't spoken to Eric since the day he got into a violent altercation with an inebriated Eric and locked him in his room. He simply replied that he needed closure. They clearly still had unresolved business, but he didn't want to make amends. He still wanted to keep Eric as a ghost from his past. I'll be there for you no matter what, but please don't speak to him. After I concluded the chat, Luke promised to give it some thought. My boyfriend continued to act strange and aloof last Wednesday. 3 days after we returned from the trip, Luke texted me in the afternoon when I was at work. "Hey beautiful, how's your day going?" he said. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation we had at Sam's vacation. My thoughts felt more ordered after these several days, and I'm no longer as anxious about it. I apologize for being a jerk and hurting your feelings about this. I neglected to mention that Alan questioned me about Eric in the morning after running into him at an event at our former institution. He inquired as to whether we would ever speak again. That simply ruined my day by reminding me of the entire incident. I threw myself on you. I apologize and sincerely hope you will pardon me. I don't want to inquire about Eric's well-being or act as though what he did to you was okay because you already know how I feel about him. You shouldn't, and I'm not okay that way whenever I think about him. So I made the decision to call him. I plan to, but I haven't yet. If you don't want me to, I will respect you by not discussing it. I'm aware that you manage things much better than I do, but just let me know if you don't want to go through again. I don't want to keep bringing this up to you because you endured a lot with him. Okay, I love you a great deal. I'm trying to make it right. Tonight, let's have dinner together. Please let me know what time you'll be home. Goodbye, my dear. I contacted him to let him know that everything was good, but I couldn't help but worry about this reunion. I have a gut feeling that Luke will be even more impacted by seeing Eric. I don't think it's a good idea, and I'll remain tense until Sunday when they're going out for coffee. Someone at our former college gave Luke his phone. After speaking, they agreed to meet. What do you think? Do I need to worry? Shall I accompany him? I'm afraid. My insecure mind continues believing that Luke will end our relationship because he has been acting strangely for days, but I am too guilty to think clearly about this anymore. Perhaps he's behaving this way because, I don't know, because of the stress of seeing Eric. I hope that when he returns from that date with Eric, his distance from me won't worsen. As soon as I can, I'll provide an update. I've returned with updates regarding my complex predicament. Reddit. My boyfriend Luke was meeting my ex-boyfriend Eric, who was once his best friend. When I last checked in, I instructed Luke to go without his car since I was okay with his meeting Eric, as long as I could come get him afterwards. I arrived 30 minutes ahead of Luke's request since I was eager to see how the talk was progressing and I was itching to kill time. I saw them seated together and having a quiet conversation when I parked in front of the coffee shop, which had glass walls. Eric appeared to be in health and was acting normally. I continued to listen to their conversation occasionally. They chuckled. I felt as though I had been back 3 years earlier. I got chills when I saw them conversing as though they were still roommates. It's true what many of you mentioned about Luke wanting to clear his conscience. Simply said, I don't trust Eric, and I don't want to consider the prospect of them reestablishing their friendship. I received comments inquiring as to if we have any updates on Eric. No. Folks weren't accustomed to discussing him with us. He is not even close to the majority of our buddies. At precisely the hour he instructed me to arrive, I texted Luke, I'll be out in a second. Do you want anything? I texted him back after he picked up the phone, and he laughed when I replied that all I wanted was for him to leave. I briefly considered approaching the coffee shop's front desk and striking up a conversation with them. I hurried out of the car after waiting for them to reach the door since I can't control my urges. Luke looked at me as if I were insane. Eric had his back to me, but he whirled to face me as if he had seen a ghost. When he noticed Luke's sight straying behind him, it felt like a kick to my stomach as Eric called my name. I felt about getting out of the automobile right away. I asked how the conversation was going and said hi. They appeared fine, and they both said everything was okay. Eric began to inquire about my life and well-being. I'm sorry, I can't do this. I just wanted to say hello because it has been a long time since we've seen each other. Can we go? I pleaded, looking desperate at my partner, who quietly laughed. I felt like throwing up. Eric grinned and continued, I know it's seeing you guys, Alice. I'm sorry it's uncomfortable. All I wanted to do was punch him, but whatever. Before Luke and I could say our goodbyes, Eric began talking once again. He was expecting an answer. But Luke and I just stared at each other, expressionless. I'm sorry for everything, Alice. You didn't deserve anything of what I put you through. I hope you guys always stay. Then he just grinned and turned to leave. Luke told me, you are very brave for doing this. As we drove to the car, I didn't want to. So I inquired as to whether he received the clarification and closure he required. I don't have to worry about that anymore, he replied, laughing. What was there for them to discuss? Luke didn't give me many clues, but he helped me figure out that he never contacted Eric, because he would fight him again harder this time for what he had done to me over the years if he had to meet him. He simply considered battling Eric and holding him accountable for all the suffering he had brought into our lives. However, he was fed up with those sporadic feelings of anger. That was his method of handling them since they last spoke 2 days ago. Everything seemed to be returning to normal, though I'll keep the paranoid thoughts to myself because I don't want to hear that name ever again. A part of me will continue to wonder if Eric will get back to him and if Luke will respond.